Hello, innovators. I am Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Junaid Ahmed, the host of the Hacks and Hobbies podcast, of which I came on your show too, actually. So it's really cool. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Absolutely, man. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast and happy to be here.
Yeah, and we've been trying to get this going for a while, so I'm glad we're finally able to do it. It's going to be a lot of fun. You and I had a very fun conversation on your show. We were already nerding about Star Wars before the recording today. Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. So the way I like to get things started is to have you please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
Hey, innovators. Thank you so much for letting me be a guest over here.
Be a host, a co-host, no way.
Be a host, a co-host.
Yeah. The way I break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Ooh. So your audience probably doesn't know a whole lot about me, but I am a beekeeper.
Ooh.
As well.
What got you into that?
That's a long story. I became a beekeeper because 8 years ago we went to my son's allergist. We found out he had a whole bunch of allergies. My wife had suspicion that he would because, she's had allergies in the family. So we went and checked him out, and sure enough, he had a ton of allergies. And one thing that what's his name?
Like a doctor?
The doctor, the allergist mentioned is that, local honey is supposed to be really good for seasonal allergies. I'm like, local honey, where do you get some of that? And he was like, well, you find some local beekeepers. So that started, because we've been consuming honey, buying honey from Costco and all these other places, but then really understanding where does honey really come from. So having knowledge of that, and over the years, I was just following different projects, and I found this one Kickstarter project that was all around extracting honey very easily from the beehives. So, it was in the back of my head. And then finally, when we moved to this new place, we had a huge yard in the backyard. I was like, hey, we've got the space to have bees now.
Yeah.
So I started searching and took a class and jumped right into, beekeeping.
Well, that's a new skill for you, and it ended up being very helpful for your thought life too. And I'm sure that having like actual honey at your location probably tastes a lot better too.
That's awesome.
I had a lot of issues with allergies a few years back, and they always sold me local honey too. And I work by farmers market, so I can pick it up pretty easily there. But it just adds a whole nother level of like protection and stuff like that because of all the pollen.
Exactly, it does. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So you got your relatively new mastermind group going on, and of course your podcast. What got you started before all that, though? What was your mindset?
Well, I've been following Tony Robbins for almost 20 years. Wow. Back in 2003. I don't even know. It's 20 years, but I've been of the mindset of just growing. And before even I met Tony Robbins, I just had a totally, open mindset on learning everything that I could about whatever I'm passionate about. Being a techno junkie for a while, growing up in Saudi Arabia, learning about computers and whatnot. So it just got me into just learning about everything that I came in touch with. And when I learned about Tony Robbins, I was like, wow, this guy is amazing, his innovation. So I got introduced to internet marketing and motivation and a long time ago before I was even able to apply it myself. Being working, going to school, college and whatnot, life just gets in the way. But then 2.5 years ago, I had finished reading the book, Crushing It by Gary Vaynerchuk. And he's like, dude, just document the story. Don't wait for perfection, because I'm a perfectionist. Being a user experience designer, I'm a pixel perfect junkie, because I gotta have everything aligned.
That's perfect.
So that's basically was the start of everything.
That's awesome. It reminds me of Crushing It. I actually read 4 out of 5 of Gary's books in a matter of a month because I was just consuming it, because I had just gotten out of a burnout. I was trying to get out of it as quick as possible. It was one of my worst ones I've had. And Gary Vee, like the reading habit was one of the only ones I could build back up for that development cycle, because it is like a habit. It's a compound interest thing. And whether it's fitness or reading, like just get yourself back into the groove. So did you read his other books as well?
I do have a couple of his other books. I have the first Crush It. I have the Crushing It. I have the Jab.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Jab one, right? So those are the books I had. I also heard some of his audiobooks. I mean, I mostly consumed it via audio because I was commuting all the time. And funny thing is,
he adds a lot.
He does, and Crush It, the Crush It book. I actually started listening to it in I think 2015, and I'm almost kicking myself because I should have finished reading the book, and I would have been on this journey a lot sooner than I am now. But we all take time. You cannot speed up the cycle of a cocoon going through the cycle to become a butterfly. So I think we all take our time based on our mindset.
Well, and I think you and I both had this kind of mindset of like, I want to be doing this at this time. I remember when I first started creating podcasts or videos, and it was interesting how like I had a trajectory in my head. I was always told you need to plan things out and have a vision map. And I was like, okay, at the start of January, I'm going to start doing videos every week. And it's just funny how like it was very engaging and motivating, but it just wasn't going to happen. Even now it's hard to do something like that, but I know I could if I possibly wanted to. And I think that for you, you're the same way. Anything you learned in your user experience history that's good to share?
so much. So I started as a designer, as a graphic designer, designing publications back in 96, 97. And I was just designing just simple ads for my uncle's business where he was selling stuff, religious books and tapes and videos for kids. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. So I created these ads, but then the more I played with it, the more I got into it. So I started designing web. I did the plain old HTML. I did like all sorts of design work. And then it was around the time when the Apple iPhone came out, 2007. And then I think it's 2008 is when we had iOS 2. And then we were able to design our own applications. So I was like, oh, I have an idea. And I was working for a company where we were managing campaigns for our local businesses. And I was like, hey, let me build this huge, humongous enterprise application for the mobile platform. So once I did that and I showed around, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I don't know if we were ever going to do it. But the product manager at that time, she was like, you should check out this course at Cooper U all around user experience. When I attended this 5-day course, it opened my mind like no other, because I came to a realization that, we are, as a designer, we're asking questions, we're solving problems, but then they give it a proper process around it. So the more I look at it, the more I look at in marketing, the more I, think about these things, they're all intertwined. You want to ask, it's same with coaches. They figure out, okay, what are you struggling with? Let me then find a solution for you. This is a solution that I came up with for myself. And now I'm coaching others on how to set up their home studios. I figure out the problem. So I'm applying all of that knowledge into marketing, into, coaching, into setting up studios, because it's as human beings, we are very pattern heavy followers,
Well, there's a lot of psychology in it too, and like you said, it's all interrelated. I was actually watching a video, Inbound 2019, which was like content marketing conference. And it's interesting how one of the presentations were talking about how these new services, Netflix, Airbnb, Carvana, they're all experience based, and and trying to make sure that the experience for the customers is smooth and easy as possible. And you have to think about it, user experience, not just on the website, but maybe on the app, on the personal connections, on the customer service. One of the really cool things, you might like this. Do you watch Linus Tech Tips at all?
I've seen a lot of his videos. Yeah,
they have this series going on where it's like they buy a whole bunch of pre-built computers from a lot of different major companies, and they document the process of the full-on journey, like ordering the actual product, when a product comes in, they actually pretend that there was an issue with it, like the RAM stick coming out of the computer, and they try to see how long it takes for the person to actually help them. And then they have the like review of the product, and then us as like a final episode about like how it all came about. And it's just interesting how just the journey someone has to go through to get a built computer for you. And it's interesting, just like the customer service is horrendous, for example, or sometimes really good in some cases, but most of the time it's like they can't even figure out one of the most basic troubleshooting IT steps.
Yeah.
And so that whole expose on the customer experience, I think, was really cool.
No, that's really neat. That's really awesome.
And so it's interesting too. Interface is a big part of UX as well. And obviously we talked about UI. Where do you see interface getting in the way of experience, or maybe vice versa?
Well, one of the things that Steve Jobs said is if you've designed something well, you don't even see the design of the experience. And user experience starts before the people even come to your website to experience the design, or before they even know what app they're going to be using, if they're going to be using your app or not, because you got to look at that customer journey. You got to look at all the things, like, for example, if you pick up your phone right now, we fly through different apps all throughout the day without even thinking of blinking about it, right? You get a notification on Facebook, you quickly go to the notification, you leave a comment, or you send a message back, you hit a thumb, like, unless you're scrolling through your Facebook feed, you do that, and then you escape out, and you're like, all right, let me go check my email, reply. So those user experiences are now built into our mind.
Seamless in a way.
Seamless, right?
Yeah.
And anytime you can break that pattern, people start noticing. And that's what happened when Snapchat first came out. They made it okay for us to create vertical videos. There was a PSA out 10 years ago. They were like, don't create vertical videos because our eyes are side by side. How are people going to consume it if they put the video up on television? So they changed the paradigm on how you create content. Instagram quickly caught on. All other applications quickly caught on, where they started creating stories. They started creating the different
even Twitter
modes, right? Even Twitter now has the stories, and as well as LinkedIn. LinkedIn recently jumped in, so they're not long lasting, but they are attention grabbing, because again, everything in social media is designed to grab attention, and it fades away because you have no idea how many videos you're going to be watching today or tomorrow, right?
Well, and it is interesting too when something blocks you in a way where, like, we're so used to that seamless experience. TikTok, for example, introduced ads over the past year. Obviously, they want to make money off the platform that they're providing. And one of the first things you see after the loading screen is a full page ad. And it takes a few seconds for that X to pop up in the corner to get rid of it. And that's a very like stopping experience, but they want you to watch it. And so it's kind of frustrating.
Absolutely. And those frustration is what, it's frustrating you, but now you've paid more attention to it than you wanted to.
Yeah.
And now it's ingrained. And then, when you come back, or when you're going searching for something, it's going to pop up and like, you know what, let me just take a look. One such product that popped up for me was the Jazzercise. I'm sure you saw that, the guy's there on YouTube, and he's like, look at my jaw. This is what I look like 30 days later. I've built muscles in my face.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So I was like, okay, that's pretty neat.
And kind of going off of some other questions here too, I'm curious because you're the host of the Hacks and Hobbies podcast, and where you talk about hobbies, passions, and life hacks. What are some of the life hacks that you have or have been told by a guest?
Man, that's a great question. There's so many hacks that we've talked about over the past 2.5 years. Some of the greatest ones are the simplest ones, like being consistent, or building a hobby attached to another hobby, something that you already do. Habit stacking, exactly right. So there's so many different ways that you can look into that. It's just been an amazing opportunity to be able to connect with others, and just a ton of fun.
I know that when I went on your show too, it was hard to pick one hobby to share with you or something like that. And it's interesting. You're what 270, 300 episodes at this point?
Yep, we're about 212 episodes total. Yeah, but I do have plans to drop at least another 40 episodes before the end of the year, because I want to close out season 3 with 100 episodes. So let's see if I get there.
Wasn't that like you took my idea or something like that?
Was that your idea?
I think so. I think we were talking about that because I'm doing a 40 days of Polycast.
We were talking a little bit about it, but no, I was
so good.
No, it's fine to still steal ideas because that's how we grow. But I was talking to somebody who recently launched their podcast, and they're like, "Yeah, we basically did 10 episodes, and we just dropped them, and told everybody that we're dropping the episodes of, like, hey, we're gonna drop your episode, let's go promote." And they got some really good downloads. Like, one of the guys got #1 in parenting.
Crazy. Yeah,
just as the first new forthcoming podcast.
I think that also too, even for podcasts or polycasts that are established like our own, having just that big influx of all these new content coming out, I think is really cool. So I'm super glad that you're doing it too, because I think it's just super engaging too. Because when someone comes in, like, I've gained followers, I've gained listeners because it's just been more frequent at this point. Yeah. I try to focus on consistency, like we talked about. That was an important factor, but I ended up having so many recordings on the backlog that I was releasing stuff from July in November, and that was insane. Like, no, I'm not making all these awesome people wait anymore. So at least not for the rest of this year.
Yep, that's exactly where I'm at. I've got about 40 episodes waiting to be published. And, pretty well. I think I have maybe one episode from June still hasn't published. But yeah.
It's crazy because it's hard to catch up sometimes too, especially when we both went on the matchmaker wave pretty early on.
Yeah, we did.
It's crazy how useful that tool is.
It is. I've been getting a lot of messages from there, and I've kind of slowed down in responding because I want to do a different type of show next year. So let's see what happens.
What do you got planned for next year then? I'm not going to just let that slide. I want to hear about this.
I think I'm going to do more of a live show, and I've got a lot of the preliminary stuff set up on my machine to be able to do live shows on the go, going Facebook Live, and then being able to bring in guests through the Ecamm platform, having different overlays, and just totally different.
So you're going through Ecamm, which I hear is one of the better tools for it. Have you thought about Restream.io?
I've looked at Restream. Restream only enables you to broadcast to multiple places. You can still use Ecamm as your broadcasting tool on your computer to send your streams out through Restream.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because I was using like Gamecaster by XSplit, or I tried OBS, but OBS has had so many finicky things. Like, if you mess up one setting, you can completely destroy your stream. So I was like, okay, I'm done with that.
Yeah, OBS has a very steep curve because it is a free tool after all, but you could do so much with it. One of my friends who I met this year, Jim Beard, he actually is the one who gave me the idea. Why don't you just do live shows for next year? I'm like, hey, I don't know if I can handle the stress, but he's been doing it. Yeah, he's been doing it, and he's got 12 people on every live show.
Really? That's crazy.
Yeah, he's basically doing a game show on Facebook, right? And so he's doing like tic-tac-toe style game, and it's pretty intense.
So, do you do much editing for your episodes? You're a perfectionist, like you said. So
I am a perfectionist, so much so that I was spending way too much time on editing my episodes. And I was like, I don't have this much time. I even got myself fired for spending too much time on my podcast. Yeah. So I was like, all right, lesson learned. Let's hire an editor. And so now I record the episode and I hand off to my editor, and I've given them a template. I've given them a skeleton of, hey, this is how I want my episodes laid out. And that skeleton needs some updating. So that's the next step for me to do.
Yeah, in Notion, the tool I really like to use, I might have mentioned on your show too, where I like to put out a lot of workflows on there. So if I do get to the point where I'm delegating more, I can just refer back to that. I think it's really useful.
That's awesome.
And it's cool because having a skeleton is really interesting. Because at the beginning, I always ask, like, share something about yourself that no one knows about you. And that's a good point, either right before that question or right after, to put in the intro. And so we have like the introduction, like we do with, hey, this is the awesome person I have on. We do the little like clip of the Polymath podcast, whatnot, and then the actual questions, and then the outro and that kind of thing. And so it is interesting, but I've grown to be less picky or perfectionist when it comes to editing.
Yes, I was like, you know what, this is it's gonna go in the records, it's gonna go up in the internet, it's gonna be there for a while, and people are going to get value out of it. So there's no point taking out the ums and ahs. Just be better about it when I'm talking.
Yeah.
To just pause instead of saying, you know.
Yeah. Well, I actually, I just said, oh, right there. I have a little thing I talk about at the very beginning. I like go through my little checklist. Like, do you need to go get a drink of water or something like that? But underneath there, I have a little section that I didn't tell you. It's like, if you could please not say or it'd be really helpful for my editing. But I just figured, okay, he's a podcast host. I don't have to worry about it too much. And so far, it's been good.
Awesome.
That's what I was wondering too, because you can't really edit live videos at this point. And so if you do live, you'll have to kind of change that whole mindset on ums or uhs.
It will be very different. So it all comes down to, how engaged is the audience when you're doing the live show, and how alert, like people become much more alert when they know they're live and it's not pre-recorded, on how they're going to be speaking. Again, you've got a really good point of, letting the person know that, hey, let's skip on the ums and ahs. If you do want to pause, just pause.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because I've been doing some live shows. Some people I've reached out to and gone onto their shows for it and live, and it's not that big of a deal. Like it's kind of exciting in a way because I'm comfortable on camera. But if I wasn't comfortable on camera, it'd be hard. And I actually did a live show the other day where it was a whole group of people, and so I saw the audience, not just like know that they're there in the chat. I saw the audience while it happened, and that made me feel a little bit more nervous than usual, which was weird. But I do think it's interesting, just kind of the new way of doing things now.
Yeah.
So going back into some of the questions here, what are some of the most interesting hobbies that you've come across?
Interesting hobbies, huh? So are these hobbies something that I've taken up on, or something that I've seen other people do?
Well, considering that hobbies are part of your show, I was kind of going off of that. But if you have interesting hobbies too, feel free to answer that.
Sure.
Beekeeping's one of them.
Yeah, so beekeeping is an awesome hobby. Cycling is another one of mine. Video production, I like, shooting films and short films. We actually did a short documentary on beekeeping, on beekeepers of Maryland, like Montgomery County specifically, because we were part of this 48-hour film festival, or it was a 48. I think it was like a month-long film festival where you make a movie in a month. So that was a lot of fun. But some other hobbies that I've seen people take on: marble runs. Like, this is so interesting. So essentially, what they'll do is they'll go outdoors. So it's two ways. So they have there's this specific YouTube channel. It's amassed about almost 1 million subscribers, and all they're doing, they've got different marbles, different color marbles. They'll go out on the beach. They'll draw out a long race corridor for these marbles, and they'll set them up on top, and then they'll say go, and then they've got each marble with a different name. So when COVID hit, people weren't watching any sports because there's no sports going on. So the commentator of this marble run was so good. Like, he would talk as if he's a commentator, and these are cars driving in the racetrack, and how there's like switchbacks and there's like loop overs, and like how one marble is taking over the other marble. And it was a good 10-minute marble run. Like, imagine the effort this person put in to dig out this entire track, right? It just blew my mind, like, watching it. So that was an interesting hobby that I, ran into. Some other crazy ones was, and this is a good example that I give to my guests and to my audiences. When they say niching down, it doesn't really mean that, you niche down to something that no one is interested in. You want to basically look at what you love to do and then create content around that or document that journey. So this one guy, Ants Canada, is a YouTube channel that had about 650,000 subscribers when I saw them 2 years ago. Now they're around 3 million subscribers, where they just have this huge cage or huge, ant farm, and they're just talking about these ants, and it's just
there's been a lot of growth in general too. I feel like over the past year, TikTok. I saw someone. I'm kind of happy. I'm annoyed by this because I've been on TikTok for so long, but I'm so happy for this person that I can't even be annoyed anymore. Because I saw this girl from basically, I think July or August, go from basically, I think it was 1,000, 10,000 subscribers. So when I subscribed to 10 million now.
Wow.
Like in 6 months, she grew 10 million subscribers. How does it get insane? Yeah. Well, and it's like I just don't know how that even happened, because it was funny how she kind of niched down on the way she would do content. Like she would have funny faces or whatnot, and that's just caught people's attention because it was unique. And then now she's doing more skits because she's gotten more popular. She needed to make it more elaborate. But it was just interesting how niching down does help. I've had an issue with that. I had to do like an anti-niche for Polymath in a way, but it is interesting just being able to be creative like that and then getting people's attention is so easy right now if you can just focus on one kind of type of creativity.
Exactly. And I think the other key to TikTok too is that once you got to play to what you're really comfortable with, and you're also posting multiple times a day. And I think the other thing I've seen is being genuine, posting content that relates, and something that's very generic that everybody's going to appreciate. So even though you're thinking niching down, it's the stuff that's more relatable that's going to get a ton of views. So one of my friends, she posted the 2 videos of the same song on Facebook, and she called it, I don't know what she called it, but she said this is the type of stuff that we're sharing in our group, so come in our group. And it was this really cool song about a father and a son, and it's an adopted son, right? And the song is like it's a country song. She got almost 500,000 views on that. That's and then crazy. we had like 5,000 new people join this Facebook group.
That's awesome though. Right? It's like crazy how that just can go viral like that.
Yeah.
So is the podcast you have a hobby or a passion or both?
I think it's it started as a hobby, and it's growing into more of a passion, because not only do I get to share my story, I also get to share the journey of my guests that I bring in. And I think the connection that I build through those conversations is really valuable, and it helps us connect. Like we've been connected for the past, few months.
4 or 5, I think.
4 or 5 months, just because, we had a conversation on the podcast. And now, we're more intertwined, like our lives are more intertwined than they would have if we just knew each other as, oh, hey, what's up?
Right. Well, if I ever go on the East Coast, I know who to visit.
Exactly. Welcome.
Well, yeah. And it's super cool too. We were both nerding out about like Star Wars and whatnot. Like you can't really see because of the bokeh effect on your camera, but there's some figurines on the bookshelf which are really cool. And
I got some guys over here.
Yeah. And it's cool because we're talking about The Mandalorian, and it's just interesting how Star Wars is evolving too. I've always been a very big nerd. I've watched Rebels, I watched the Clone Wars and all the big movies. And what's some of your favorite parts about the series?
Which series specifically?
Just like the Star Wars series in general.
Not gonna lie, I like all of it. I do like that you gotta have balance, and it actually it's so funny that they talk about the lighter side and the dark side, because you can't have one without the other, right? You gotta have balance in the universe. There gotta be balance in the Force. Just like we have day and night, they're like light and dark side. So it's really cool. Some of the things that I really like what they're doing is the technology advancement that they're coming up with just to shoot these films. Like, long are the days gone of green screen, right? They've got
The Mandalorian, especially, like the whole.
Their entire set is digital.
Yeah,
you can drop in any. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too. Did you watch the animated stuff of Rebels and Clone Wars?
I have, yes.
Okay. There's so much lore in that, and you're mentioning the whole balance. That's my personal principle in life. There's balance, and it's interesting because they're talking about the ancient ones, the order before the Jedi, and with like two eyes and the space in there. And that order actually balanced all three, the dark side, the light side, and the Bendu, which is that balance in the middle. And it wasn't until they split off that became the Sith and Jedi down the line. And it was just kind of cool because they actually referenced the Bendu in Rebels. And I think that they're also kind of referencing it in some of the newer series as well, like some of the series that are about to come out, which are going to be really cool. And I think that's going to be much more balanced in the future.
Wow, the more you mentioned about the three that balance each other, it's almost like our government, right? We have the three sides balancing each other.
Well, I feel like they had to do a little bit better job balancing. Maybe we needed Anakin Skywalker or something like that.
I know, right?
But it is interesting because what was I thinking? There is this interesting concept behind just being a gray Jedi, which supposedly is uncanon. But I think that there's a lot of potential for like Ahsoka, or Rey was supposed to be kind of in a way to be a gray Jedi. And I think that's just really cool.
Yeah. Now, what was really cool is before the Ahsoka episode when we had, what's her name?
Bo-Katan.
Bo-Katan. I'm like, why do I know her?
It's the same actress.
It is.
Who did the cartoon too?
Oh, really? She did the voice.
Yeah. They even modeled her after her, I think, too. So it's super cool.
I was like, she looked really close to. Why does she look so similar?
Yeah,
so that's good to know.
Well, and there's going to be probably some other characters that haven't shown up yet, but we're theorizing in the Star Wars community about it, like Admiral Thrawn from Rebels, which is supposed to come back. And I think that's going to be super cool.
It's going to be super awesome.
Yeah. And speaking of principles, mine is balance. Yours, you told me beforehand, were connection, compassion, and charisma, the 3 C's. So can you explain that a bit?
Well, I believe that without compassion, it's really hard to connect on a human level, because as human beings we have feelings and we want to feel connected one way or another. So I think having compassion for not just the other person, because that's easy, having compassion for yourself is the hardest thing, because we shoot ourselves down more times than somebody else is gonna. So I think that's super important, to have the compassion. And charisma comes from being uniquely yourself, being uniquely, embracing all your faults, all your strengths, like everything. When you embrace that, you become more and more charismatic, because you are content with who you are. And when you share that with the world, people see that. They can, we can, like, you probably had this feeling like when you meet somebody, like, something's off about this person. Why am I not feeling connected? It's because they are putting a cover
closed off, and
they're closed off, or they're putting a mask up on themselves. They're like, oh, I'm this person, and it just doesn't, like, you don't find that sincerity between the two characters that they're trying to portray.
Well, and there is this kind of notion of context switching or putting on a persona. Like when I teach swim lessons or water aerobics, I put on a persona, but that's still me in a way. But there's still a level of charisma that's outside of that realm. Because those context switching are just purely because of the environmental factors and the people you're around.
Yeah.
And the charisma still stays the same. Exactly. Are you closed off or are you open up? I was actually at karaoke the other day, very, very carefully and whatnot, with masks and 6 feet away from everybody. But it was the first time I had to sing in a long time. And I've always been very good at not being nervous. Like, I haven't been nervous since, like, basically the first time I ever really sang. And for the first time since then, essentially, my legs started shaking from being nervous. But I was still doing a song I knew well. I was a good singer. I knew what to do. And so even though I was nervous and kind of messing up at some points too, no less, I didn't let that stop my emotions and happiness. And like people still picked up a good vibe from the whole experience. And so even with mistakes and like giving myself crap, I was able to still stay myself, so to speak.
That's awesome. I sing every once in a while when I'm in the car. I'm just not good at the lyrics part.
Yeah, it is hard to learn lyrics. That's why karaoke is nice because they show it to you on the screen.
Absolutely.
I think that you might be someone to do karaoke with in the future. It'd be a lot of fun.
That would be pretty fun, yeah.
In season 1 of your show, it was more about your journey. Season 2 is about talking to interesting people. And I think you just mentioned earlier about the live streaming. Where do you see season 3 taking you, though?
I think season 3 was kind of a continuation of season 2, talking to more and more people, bringing them on and sharing their journey. And it just happened to be that I love to batch record a ton of episodes. And as I was releasing episodes last year, I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? So what ended up happening is the year came to an end, and I was like, okay, well, season 2 is done with 100 episodes. I've got to start with season 3. And I didn't really put a whole lot of thought. Like I didn't spend a ton of time in figuring out what I wanted to do with the next year, especially because I had just gotten a new job back in end of 2019, going into 2020, and I was like, well, I'm just going to keep this going. I don't have a ton of time to, figure out what I want to do. So I just kept going, and I even had some episodes back in the beginning of season 3 where it says season 2.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and it's interesting, kind of going back on what we talked about at the beginning too, no less. It's that idea of overly planning. Like we're both perfectionists in a way. And I remember when I was planning out my content ahead of time, like I have hundreds of ideas for my main series, but I have not really worked on it much this year. I've been working on the Polycast. And it's interesting how the same thing happened beforehand when I wasn't doing repurposing. I was just focusing on YouTube, separate from the blog post, separate from the Polycast. And I think that whole planning process held us back. And when we just started doing it, I even had actual plans for like, this is how I'm going to transition into the next season. This is how I'm going to do this. Now at this point, I'm literally going to upload probably the last interview of this season. And then probably next week or this week even, start the next season, just right off the bat, because I want to finish that whole daily upload this year kind of thing. And I think it's interesting how does our seasons. I'm approaching the end of my third now because I do 42 episodes a season. How many is per yours? 100?
So for season 1, I did 68 episodes because, I was just getting into it. I didn't have guests. Actually, I had a few guests, but I didn't really plan it out. And then season 2, I had a full 100 episodes. Season 3, I'm at 45 right now, or 46. And I've got 40 more to go out. So
yeah,
we'll see if I'm able to get, 15 more interviews in before the end of the year, and then push all of them out together, and then let's see what happens.
I was trying to go for a systematic approach of 42 per season. And for those of you who know the importance of 42, you'll know why. But it's interesting how, because that's kind of just what I ended up having. So I combined multiple different of my old shows together into one season. It's like they all basically are the same content. It's just different names, essentially. And so I was like, okay, let's forget this. Let's put it all into there. And after that, those are all solo. And then the second season's the start of the interviews. Nice. So I was wondering if you're doing seasons based around this whole theme of myself, other people, live streaming, and something like that. Be kind of cool.
Yeah. Again, like you said, you got to put in time to do the planning and then be able to execute the planning. So I really haven't had the time to plan it all out that way.
Right. Well, and another aspect of your life too is the blogging. So where do you see the purpose of your blog, by the way?
So I have multiple blogs, actually. I have superjunaid.com where I talk about life. I have a technojunkie.com where I talk about tech. There's another one that I need
Humblezone?
Humblezone is another site, which is basically a company site all around digital branding. So we help you set up your digital brand. And so with Hacks and Hobbies, the blog posts are technically the episodes. The idea was to be able to create content or have some kind of place to share what's in my head. Right, one way or another. The podcast has mostly become guest focused, where I don't really have solo episodes. I tried it last year, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a solo episodes every Monday, talk about what's upcoming, what people got to hear last week. But again, it requires you to have a time, have a team in place with systems in place. But I think all of this year, I've been able to create a half a system, or some sort of system where I have
a basis.
Couple people. I have a VA, I have a editor. I need to bring in somebody who's a copywriter, so then, or somebody who can manage the two, and I just like, hey, here's the new stuff, take care of it, and go from there. But again, that requires that we have some sort of income coming. Right. So I think that's one of the plans for next year, is to have some sort of income coming in, so then I can hire a team and streamline the whole process.
So this really makes me think about just what we're both doing. And one thing I've been trying to do is consolidate. And because you have so many different blogs, I think whenever I was researching you in the first place a while back, I remember thinking about like consolidation and how you might be able to bring things together. And so it's interesting how, like, what if you were to combine all those blogs and then combine it into a website under your name, your personal brand in a way? It's like you have a good name, you have a good brand already. What if you were to have the Hacks and Hobbies podcast as a different taxonomy? And then, for example, my blog is the Omni blog. I have Omni for all topics and for all of my stuff to come together, because I just wanted to have an easy naming convention so I could have an excuse to have divergent topics.
Exactly.
And I wonder if that might be good for you too, where you just have your own like Omni Junaid blog or something like that. It'd be kind of cool.
Well, I do have a blog that is superjunaid.com, right? So that's all inclusive of Junaid. But I've kind of separated Technojunkie as a separate thing, because when I first launched it, we were talking a lot about Mac, we talked about a lot of iPhone, and I had my cousin also contributing as a contributing blogger. And he talked a lot about hacking the Hackintosh or the Macintosh. And he had a huge following on there because he was very active in the community. He's very active in the hacker community, Hackintosh community. And so people were coming on there just to ask him questions, and he was very involved. When he stepped away, I wasn't really contributing a whole lot because, well, life.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if maybe like, because you have the Hacks and Hobbies, what if that became like the technojunkie became the hacks part of that? And so you just expand the Hacks and Hobbies to include more of a personal brand for you. And then so it kind of has a hack section, the hobby section, the podcast is both. And I don't know, it's kind of a cool idea, I think.
Yeah. No, there's a ton of things that I've been thinking about too, kind of like creating Humblezone as the umbrella, and then all the different aspects of it underneath it. And kind of like what Intuit did, when they bought TurboTax and they bought Mint, and they have, so many different properties, and then how the logos look very similar, but they are their own entities. And again, that's the part of the niching now. And if you're interested in hobbies and hacks, go to Hacks and Hobbies, read the blogs there, and there's guest blogs and guest podcasts. Interest more into technology, go here. And then there's other aspects of things like Mastermind, right? Home studio Mastermind, like where's that going to fit in? Is that going under the Hacks and Hobbies or Humblezone? So I'm still figuring all of that out.
It's interesting because I really like this conversation, because it's almost like user experience in a way. Like, how are we making the user of all your different platforms come together or something like that? Yeah. And that's actually what I tried to do with PolyInnovator. I created this PolyInnovator ecosystem to be the umbrella. That's why I created this personal brand, is to be the foundation for all the different bits and pieces in the future. PolyInnovator music or gaming or exercise and that kind of thing, where they're their own entities, like you said, very astutely, but they're part of that same umbrella. And that's what's kind of interesting. We're on opposite ends there. It's kind of cool.
That is pretty neat.
Did you have any thoughts on that?
No, that's exactly perfect way to go about it. See, you had a foresight to think through it before jumping right into it. I initially created Humblezone 20+ years ago.
Oh wow!
Right, so I had that going, and then I was like, oh, that's going to be my company where I've been doing freelance work. It's incorporated. It was incorporated for some time. Now it's an LLC. And then I created superjunaid.com, which was my blog. And I just have ramblings. I have a ton of poems on there. I have like lyrics of music that I've used to sing along. So it was like almost like a repository of all things that are going in my head.
Yeah.
So that was that. And then, so I kind of tried to niche down, but then it ended up being, being a collaboration, everything, because that's just the way I think about things.
I just found that really interesting too, because I was writing down an idea for the title there, because this kind of comes down to what I've been trying to work on too, and what you've been trying to do too. We're both trying to reevaluate what our plans are and how we're going about the content. And I think it's a constant evolution of personal branding.
It
and
is.
like Gary Vee says, like documenting, but I'm also a creative. I'm not sure if you are as well, but we just like being able to get stuff out there. And it's interesting how that's how PolyInnovator started. It's how you started to a degree as well. And over time, you just get better and better. You find new systems, new tools, and you reevaluate your whole strategy and redo it, essentially.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more on Humblezone?
Absolutely. So Humblezone started as a website design company, and I designed logos. I mentioned earlier, I was designing graphics and websites and stuff for my uncle back in the days. And I was like, hey, Humblezone is going to be pretty cool. And I came up with the name Humble because in 1995, I was into Jeet Kune Do, or I took 3 months of Jeet Kune Do or kickboxing, and their maxim had to do something with humble, like I am a humble person and I'm not going to attack. So that humble stuck with me. So I was like, hey, I'm going to create Humblezone. So it was available as a domain. I was like, all right, I'm going to jump on this. And so created Humblezone. And that's where Humblezone, started from. And the last time I had updated the website, it was like in 2004.
Oh, wow.
And the website was, just stagnant forever. And then I was like, I'm going to shut that down. And so I shut it down in 2016, I think, or maybe it was 2018. I was like, I'm going to bring the new site back. So that's still under construction. I've got a lot of it completed, recently. I was looking to launch the whole everything last year, or this year, I think. But it's been a crazy year. And I was like, what? I'm just going to go with what I've written down so far. So there's still some work need to be done on humblezone.com, and then I can start promoting it or start bringing people in so I can help them set up. And the mastermind was one way to do that.
Yeah.
Was, hey, I'm going to help you set up your image the best possible when you're showing up on video, because guess what we're doing right now?
Right.
And guess what we've been doing all of 2020 is being on Zoom calls. So how to look the best on video, right, as a video podcaster or as, somebody who's selling services or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm going to create a mastermind around that. And then if you need additional help, hey, we can also make you look good on your website, make you look good on your branding. So basically bring it all together, similar to, how you created your own PolyInnovator.
Yeah. Well, it's about having that kind of cohesive omni-channel branding, so to speak.
Yes.
And just to kind of note too, we're actually not on Zoom. We're on riverside.fm. Want to give them a shout out. And it's a tool that I discovered over the summer, but I couldn't initially afford it. And it's really cool how they've evolved over time. And it's literally the only tool where you can get native video and audio at like a very high resolution and text FPS versus Zencaster, which is still in beta, and Squadcast, which I haven't even seen any news on their video. And Zoom compresses the hell out of all of their audio and video. Yeah, just everything. And they try to upscale it afterwards too. So it looks, not only is it compressed, but it's also stretched out. It's crazy.
It's horrible.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that this is going to be 1080p for us both. I'm not sure how the end result's going to be because it's been a minute, but I'm excited about that.
Nice.
And like you said, it's all about that presentation. How good, how crisp are our freckles on our face going to be? So this is kind of a different question here, but I think it had to do with some of your overall belief systems and being humble too. how can we be the person who is living each and every day presently?
Know that we're not here forever.
Some Gary Vee vibes right there.
It is. But what's funny is that we just found out the babysitter for my second son who used to come, her father just passed away, over the weekend. And the doctor has just cleared him to go home. He had a heart surgery. He was cleared to go. Everything was fine. And the next day, he passes away. And there's no cause. So it's a reminder, it's a stark reminder. We see these COVID deaths every day. Oh, it's at 10,000 in the past 4 days. It's a stark reminder that we're not here forever. So do the best that you can, be the most compassionate that you can around the people who are, because when you're gone, how you acted with somebody is what people are going to remember.
Well, and it makes me think about people like us who are creating this content. We're creating the stuff that we want to put out there in the world.
Yeah.
And I feel so behind. Like in my own personal head and trajectory, I feel like I am just underwhelming the whole world, but I've probably done more than most people do when it comes to content creation.
Oh, yeah.
My goal was to do 100 pieces of content every day. Thanks, Gary Vee, for putting that in my head. But I developed a strategy and a mindset and overall systems to get that to happen. And even though I'm not quite doing it yet, I know how to do it. And once I get to that point, I'll be able to share all the information that I have in here and people I'm learning from the show as well, like you yourself on here. So thank you.
Exactly.
And I think that there's going to be something left behind. So if one of us were to leave next year or 10 years from now, we'll have so much amazing content out there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think one of the folks I talked to very, very beginning in my podcasting journey, I met him through the Anchor community, and he was like, "Hey, let's do a guest episode." So I came onto his, he came on my podcast, and I went on his, and I asked him, what inspired you to start this podcasting? Because he had like 4 different podcasts as a coach and whatnot. And he's like, well, he couldn't find any information on his grandparents or his father. And he's like, I want to leave this as a legacy so that when my kids grow up, they'll know a little bit about me through this content.
Well, and it's interesting too, because regardless of its family or someone who's similar in nature, I thought if I ever failed at my goals, regardless of how ambitious they are, someone else could take up the mantle of poly-innovator 100 years from now or something like that. They might love that idea. And like, I'm trying to be a successor to Leonardo da Vinci. It's like, okay, well, that's a pretty bold thing to say. What is kind of your bold magnum opus of sorts that you hope to achieve?
I don't know, man. I just want to be a good parent and provide the lessons for my kids so they can be good citizens in this world. And, I always remind them, hey, if you don't have something nice to say, just don't say it, because, you're putting bad vibes out in the world. They're going to come back and they're going to haunt you.
Right. And so from digital marketing to beekeeping, you have and to aspire to have a wide-ranging skill set. What makes you so naturally inclined to be interdisciplinary?
Man, that's a tough question, but I think just the beauty of it all, because everything that we experience, everything that we use was something else, right? We like right now we have recycled, we recycle water. Water is always recycled because water doesn't reduce or, increase in quantity all over the world. But the ability to create a product, to create something out of simple squares and circles, or, remolding something to create something else, it just fascinated me throughout my life. And I saw what my mom used to do, and, she was into everything and she could figure things out. So I'm proud to say, I have some or most of her, curiosity to be able to dig in and understand the mechanics of it all. One thing that I always mention, my favorite part of the movie Iron Man, the first one, was when he's tinkering in that cave creating that suit, or when he's back in his, when he's back in his workshop and he's like tinkering with this thing. Like, that's my favorite part, because you understand what it takes to be creative, to create something from another thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and something you're going to really like is this productivity suite music, where it just basically uses the hammering and the soundtrack behind that, and makes a 40-minute long video that you can listen to while you're working. And I swear, I don't think I've ever been as productive. It's insane. But yeah, and that whole mindset, like, there was a clip in that movie too where the bad guy's yelling at one of the scientists, like, Tony Stark built this in a cave from a box of scraps. And it's because when you hit your lowest point, you're the most open to change, but that also includes the most open to create things as well.
Yeah.
If you have to create something to get out of that situation, then we created our brands to get out of a situation that we didn't quite like before when it came to employment or life.
Yeah. I think one thing really important that sticks out when you mention that scene is that the reason Tony Stark was able to create that in that little cave is because he had 100 constraints. And people talk about not having constraints. Forget about it. You're going to be so lost. You need constraints to be able to creative. When the first iPhone came out, everybody was like, oh, this does have it doesn't have 3G, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, that's the way. This is the way. Right?
This is the way. Yes.
So having those constraints enables you to be super creative. And for example, I was listening to this podcast episode, Piano Teachers Parenting, and she talks about try creating try coloring a page with 3 colors. You're going to be more creative than you've ever been. And if you think about
pencil,
right? Or pencil, exactly. So, and what's funny is that some of the first movies that we saw, they limited the number of colors they wanted to use on the set because it made it so much easier and able to be more creative. So I've adopted that philosophy. You can be as creative as you want. Just go inside the box and see what you can do. Everybody wants to think outside of the box. Yes, it's possible, but that means that you're
wasting energy in a way. Like you're putting it somewhere else.
Exactly. You're wasting energy.
This is something that I've had to deal with too, and I get it. There's this whole idea behind like deep work too, and isolating your time, constraining yourself to be more productive in a shorter time span. I don't remember what principle or law it is, but they say that like depending on how much time you give to work on something, it'll expand. The task will expand to fill that time.
Yes.
And so if you give yourself 30 minutes, you're going to have 30 minutes to do that. But if you give yourself 3 hours, you're going to have 3 hours to do it. That's one thing I'm fighting the past month because I've been editing my own videos because we're talking about the daily upload.
Yeah.
I've been doing the editing, the rendering, the uploading, and the promoting all in one day. And the editing takes at least a couple of hours, but it could probably take me less if I was a little less picky on the ums and ahs and just kind of sped through it. Because as long as I get rid of the chunks where the guest says, oh, I don't want that part in there, or I don't want my little tangent that I have like right now, I might cut out or something like that. And it's one of those things where just being less picky about it will make me go quicker, and then I can get it out quicker and people will be happier because they get it sooner. And so that constraint would help a lot.
Absolutely. And that's why when you hire a team, when you bring a team on, they only have one task to do. They don't need to do 10 different things. And that, like you and I are thinking about 10 different things to do. They're like, oh, I just need to edit this episode. This is a template. I'm done. Go into the next one.
This goes interesting into the theme of the show, then, the polymathy, so to speak. Because we're people who want to do the 10 different things to a degree. There's also people who need to do just one thing. And so I think it's interesting and about delegation. Like, should we delegate to someone who's polymathic and who can do many different things, but maybe not, it can do it 80% well, whereas specialists can do it 100% well, something like that? Or should we just delegate just to specialists?
Well, that's an interesting point. As a polymath, think about the life of, let's say, our Renaissance man like Leonardo da Vinci, and they didn't work on 10 different things at the same time. They only worked on one idea at a time. Once they had that fully idea drawn out, executed, then they went on to the next idea.
Well, it's context switching too, because even if they were doing 10 things in one day, they were still doing one thing at a time. It wasn't like he was writing a book while
Sure.
studying a cadaver and then also painting the Mona Lisa on the side.
Absolutely.
He was doing maybe an hour of this, hour of that,
But
or maybe a few hours. Please.
no, I agree. But like I said, I have no idea. I haven't read into the history of how he really did things.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say to it. But my thought is, he probably said, okay, on Monday, I'm going to paint the Mona Lisa and I'm going to spend some time on it. On Tuesday, I'm going to, so time blocking. So then you're able to better context switch. But again, having the discipline to create those time blocks and then following through, I think that is where
the power of constraint.
Yes.
Yeah. So I find this fascinating because not only is it the theme of my show, but I'm also a systematic thinker too. So I try to combine those together. I think it's super engaging. I was watching, Elon Musk is a good example. He has a ton of different companies. He says he spends 100 hours a week, 50 hours between different companies. He's an extreme example, but he is a good example to think about where he's doing 3 different companies. Mark Zuckerberg, I was actually watching a video of him with Marquise Brownlee, MKBHD on YouTube. And it was a short clip. It was like 20 minutes long of an interview, but Mark was talking about how he has 3 different companies and he likes to focus on one per week.
Yeah.
And oftentimes he can't do that. Like something's going to come up and some people are going to bother him about something and he has to switch. But he tries to make sure he gets that one task done really well in that day or week. And that's how he's able to work on so many different companies.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely the way to do it. Once you have those systems and that thought process in place, that's why he wears the same clothes every day or same looking clothes, probably not the same clothes.
Yeah.
Right.
I've definitely tried to simplify my wardrobe because of that whole idea.
Yeah. Exactly.
Although a lot of my pants have been breaking lately, so that's not cool. that quarantine the diets, I guess you could say, have consumed me a bit. So something I ask all my guests, which is a good question to ask next, actually, is what is a polymath to you?
I did not know of that term till I actually met you. So
I've gotten that a lot,
right? So I've thought a lot about it. It's enabled me to be more accepting of who I am, because before I was like, oh, I shouldn't be doing so many different things because I'm not being focused. But then when I had heard the term Renaissance man, like, oh, this is a Renaissance man. I had no association to put towards that. But then when I looked more into it, it's like, oh, that's what a polymath is. So it really opened my mind. It made me like the word I was saying, compassion earlier, enabled me to be more compassionate about who I am.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I found that it's a lot more common than a lot of people realize too. And society has been conformed by that industrial revolution mindset where we have to be cogs in the wheel and specialists. And there's obviously a need for specialists. We need people like doctors who are a specialist in the aortic valve and the heart, for example. But there's also the idea of like people who, there was a story in Range, which is a book by David Epstein, where they talked about how the best time to get heart surgery was when all the cardiac people were actually out in a conference and you actually talk to a general practitioner instead. And it's because of that polymathic mindset that GPs had to have. They were able to see a problem that wasn't in the heart, it was in the lungs or something like next to it, that if you did operate on the heart, the lungs would have gotten infected or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of taking a holistic view, so to speak. That
is really an interesting thought.
And I mean, sure, there's probably plenty of cases where you need that cardiac surgeon to do that. But
you do.
You also might have other problems too.
Yeah, you do have to take a more closer look into, hey, this is a problem. We need to get you in immediately because, well, almost 15 years ago, my grandmother, she went for a routine check. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh no, we have to get you into surgery. Your arteries are blocked, blah, blah, blah. We need to get you to, so she's like, all right, let's do it. I don't know how much thought she had about if she needs to do it or not, or if she needs to see a general practitioner, see what else they can do to fix that issue instead of just going into operation. Because, no offense to the medical profession, I just don't find a lot of sincerity in the system they put in place in the world, and especially in the U.S. Anyways, she got her surgery done. There was some mishap that happened, which caused her to have internal bleeding. Maybe there was pneumonia. They had to go back in. She like all her, they had to then like her heart shut down. They had to reboot her, and then there's like a whole bunch of problems like she never came out of. She was bedridden since then. She couldn't talk for 10 years till she passed away back in 2013. So it's insane. Like, yeah, you got to have a more holistic view of things, and before you just jump into, I don't know.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, and it's like, is that problem really need to be taken care of in that way? Was there some kind of medicine she might have been able to take instead of having surgery?
Yeah.
Or perhaps maybe go on a special diet for a couple months or something like that to change
Exactly
how the clogging could be. I don't know what options were available, especially back then. But again, taking a different approach to it and taking a polymathic approach would probably have helped a lot.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that with me. That was interesting. So yeah, I guess moving on to the next question here so we don't kind of mellow out too much there, but what are some of the things you've learned about yourself over the course of your careers? Because you worked a lot, and I'm curious about that.
What I've learned is that I am more of a task-based person, not somebody who's creating tasks for myself, and that's what I learned. I learned that when I'm given tasks, I'm able to complete them, and in order to be successful for my own self and as an entrepreneur, as a podcaster, I need to create these tasks for myself and then be able to follow through or have a grand scheme of things, So I realized that I need to do this for myself. So luckily this year I've met with a ton of new people that I've never like you and I, but I've met these people over the year because we're all at home, because it's a different part of my journey as well. I'm in another mastermind where we meet every week, and we're talking about how to set up systems and how to set up processes. But then the mindset that comes from it, because this gentleman has been running masterminds for the past 5 years, and being able to be successful at that, like how is he able to do it? How is he able to just work 10 hours per week, right? 4-hour work week by Tim Ferriss was a great example. And I was like, how is he even able to do that? I read that book almost 10 years ago. I'm like, this is BS. Till I finally found myself hiring a VA. I'm like, oh, this is what he's talking about. Right. So I found myself, having a good step-by-step of, hey, if you want to get to this result, you got to have these steps. So I got to design these steps for myself to be able to hold myself accountable. So that's definitely something I've learned.
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I thought there was that weird delay on video meetings there. And it's interesting because I think I mentioned this on the show just a little bit because I was still kind of in the early stages of it, but I've been using Notion all year, and more I've been learning about how to go really deep into it because it's a skill being able to use Notion, let alone the really unique features of it. So I actually made a playlist called the Notion Operating System, which I got after the idea of Second Brain by Tiago Forte or August Bradley, who's a really awesome YouTuber I talked to. He created this Pipes, Pillars, and Vaults life operating system in Notion. And that's a whole mouthful right there.
Wow.
But Pipes, Pillars, and Vaults is talk about the pillars of your life, like your health, your work, your happiness, your finance. And then the pipes being the tasks and ideas and stuff that you need to do to accomplish those pillars and build them up. And then the vaults are like the databases housing all that. And it's really interesting how he put together this task list that is dependent on another task. And he talks a lot about like due dates, not DUE dates, but DO dates. What days are you going to go do that task? Because it's way more important about when you're doing it, not when it's due by. And that was like, okay, that's a philosophical revelation right there. And like, that's going to change a lot of things. And then there's all these other people who created the like second brain, like I mentioned, the, what is it called? There's also the get things done mentality. And what is the second brain one though? That is, PPS? No, I can't remember what it is, but it talks about being para method. That's what second brain is, para method.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to find a way to combine all of those into
Nice.
Notion in a unique way. Because I also created my own content production system as well as a CRM for guests like you.
Yeah.
So how can I combine all of that in a very efficient and consolidated manner?
That's very powerful. I like that. I like that a lot because earlier, so being in that mastermind, we, since he's been doing it for 5 years, he's like, this is what we do at the end of the year. Like, so last week we started going over goal planning, or, what are we going to do next quarter? Or sorry, next year. Let's figure out what we want to do quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, how much money you want to make, how much time you want to spend to make that money, and how much fun you want to have. So thinking at a much higher level, I've never done that before. I've always just been, okay, what am I doing next week? It was my farthest thought. And then going into the calendar and blocking out the time for vacation, for family time.
Oh, yeah.
Time blocking. I'm like, oh my God. And I love time blocking because when I set up these podcasts, I've sent a calendar link. It's got all the times available, and people are like, all right, let me see if this matches my calendar. Boom, this works. Let's do it. So we're already creating time blocks when we set up these meetings.
Yeah.
Why don't we create a time block with ourselves? I'm going to meet with Junaid. We're going to talk about this thing. We're going to do this. So it's really hard to do, but I think once you get a rhythm around it, it totally changes the way you go.
I synced it up with my Google Calendar too. So I have clients I take care of in person for my real jobs, so to speak. And ironically, I only work 4 to 7 hours of the week at this point. So we're talking about 4-hour work week. It's like, oh, don't come at me, Junaid. But it's funny because I still need to make more and whatnot. But I have those time blocks for those clients. And so that way no one can book a meeting during that time.
Yeah.
And it's super interesting too, because years back when I was working on my previous endeavor, which if you scroll down the Polycast, you'll hear the podcast from that old ULC endeavor. But I was talking to a mentor, a life coach, so to speak, and he was like, it was one of the free intro calls, but he gave me so much great advice. And one of the things he told me was the time block. And I could not wrap my head around it. I knew how good it would be. He praised to the ends of the earth how good it was, how his clients made significant progress because of it. But I could not get myself to do it. I felt so trapped by that. But as soon as you realize it's more freeing than it is trapping you, and you actually have more freedom to do the things that you want to do because you're blocking it out and making sure you actually have time enough for it. Because otherwise, this meeting could run out for a whole nother time. I always ask, like, when do you need to leave? Because I'll leave whenever you leave, basically. But like, again, there's still kind of this mental time block. And then on top of that too, I do have a meeting at about the same time you do too. So it's like we have a block. And it's just interesting how it gives us the freedom to do more, I guess you could say.
Just like we block out time, hey, I'm going to sleep from, 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. or whatever.
Right.
Or I'm going to have lunch from 12 to 1, so those are mental time blocks. We don't really put them on our calendars. But now that we're working virtually, you kind of have to put blocks on the calendar, like, hey, this is the time I'm focusing. Don't schedule any meetings at this time, or at this time I'm going to be having lunch. So, don't schedule any meetings at this time. And so anytime I set up these calls, it automatically puts it on my calendar that, hey, Junaid's busy with working or focusing or whatever.
So it feels like you're coming after me, Junaid, because before this call, I had to ask for a few minutes to eat my lunch there. I should have time blocked my lunch a little bit better.
I'm not really coming at you. It's just a normal of a conversation.
No, but it is interesting about habit stacking too. So like a lot of my workout habit came from the fact that I worked at a recreation center, so I could just have that system in place. So when quarantine hit, I actually screwed that up quite a bit. But time blocking would be really helpful too, because that reminds me of we were speaking about habit stacking and consistency. And James Clear mentions the whole idea of setting an intention to do something. He was reading the studies about it, and he put it in his book Atomic Habits, where they had a control group who said, hey, go exercise this week and tell us what you did. The other group watched a motivational video and then went out to go work out. There's a slight increase there. But the last group they watched the same video, but they also wrote down a specific time, date, and place of where they're going to do their workout that next coming week. and they were far more successful at doing it. And so I realized that, hey, I had this old habit or system in place to build habits for working out. It's not working well for me right now because I'm only working 3 to 4 times a week at that recreation center. I need a time block on my calendar before or after the class that I teach, and that'll get me to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've failed to do proper time blocking for myself on, when am I going to do the outreach, when am I going to do the calls to sell people into my mastermind, or I haven't been doing that because I've got a full-time job. And that's the other thing, right? We love putting excuses and like, oh, I'm not doing this because of this. But really we're just I don't know.
We're floating back. So it is a weird year. And so that's going to cause a lot of disruptions in our habits and our systems and our mindset. And I think that people like us are doing well considering. And I wanted to ask you too, how are you and your family doing during this time?
We're doing pretty good. My wife's, working full time, and myself as well. We've got our, separate offices. She's in the up in the master bedroom. I've got my office studio set up here, and then the kids have their own, set up, so they're going school virtually. So we've been doing pretty well. We were pretty tightly locked in for the first 60 days, and then we found out that my brother-in-law, who lives down the street, was also doing the same thing. So now we get to hang out every once in a while. So it's been pretty good so far.
That is good. And it is interesting how we had to change our whole setups and whatnot. And you talked a lot about how you set up your podcast hosting station. And so how has that process been for you?
Oh, it's already set up.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, how was it for you? Like, what was the process like? What were the results that we can see from beyond what we can see, actually, really?
Yeah. So what I did was I set up the room in a way to be able to show up on video without having to look away from the camera. Because right now, there's another upgrade that I did just last week where I added a teleprompter in front of my camera. And even though I'm looking directly at the camera, I'm also looking at you.
Oh,
because
that's cool.
I have a monitor underneath the teleprompter where I can just mirror the video call. So
yeah, because right now I'm looking at you, but then I'm also actually looking at you, so I have to look up and down.
Yeah, so I don't have to do that anymore. And I'm like, yes, I've finally done it.
That's awesome, though. I didn't really think about the teleprompter being a good monitor viewfinder, so to speak. And so one last question before we kind of end up wrapping up, too. Where do you see your YouTube channel growing?
So on the YouTube channel, I've been doing so I've been creating a lot of videos, but I haven't been posting. So the videos that are on there are all tech. They're all like tech hacks. This is how you could do, or a walkthrough or on how to use a certain application. And I've recorded a lot more videos on how I'm using my setup or how I set up my podcast studio and stuff like that. So there's a ton more video coming on the podcast, on the YouTube channel. They're going to talk about my setup, why I chose this lighting, all the different things that I've learned through other YouTubers. And
we should talk more too. That'll be helpful. I think that'll be fun.
Absolutely.
I just realized, actually, I just opened it up so I can look at it while I was listening to you, and I'm like, I wasn't subscribed yet. I gotta fix that because it's a good channel.
Thank you.
And so, where can people find you online, so to speak?
So they can find me on my hacksandhobbies.com website, where they can check out the latest episodes. I'm all over the social, as Hacks and Hobbies, or they can even go to superjunaid.com. So they can check out my my blogs, and I need to update that site so they can connect to all the different areas that I'm available.
Well, and hopefully Humblezone will be done too by the time this goes out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I honestly probably won't take too long for this episode to come out, but that was just a little joke there. And then the other thing would be, what would be a call to action for the audience to do today?
Come and subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can check out the new videos that I'm dropping in.
And I also like to ask, what can be a call to growth for the audience to do? So beyond checking out your cool stuff, what can they do to grow themselves?
So one thing you want to do is block your time. Block, so we on a daily basis we'll create a reminder list or a grocery list of sorts. When I'm going to Costco, when I'm going to the grocery list or a grocery store, I want to make sure that I buy all the stuff that I need at home. But you could do the same thing for your day-to-day. Like make a list of all the things that you want to get done today versus tomorrow, and reverse engineer. I think one of the simplest thing that we totally forget, and it's a example that a lot of us can relate. Since we've been stuck at home, we've been assembling furniture, we've been rearranging our rooms because we've got nothing else to do. And if you take a look at when you open the box for IKEA furniture, on the front page of it, they tell you this is what you're going to achieve. And as you open the booklet and you go through it, they're like, these are the tools you need. We have all these parts marked as this. Just put them together and you will be successful. So having a success board or success journey or vision board, I think a lot of people say, is really important because that will enable you to visualize the steps that you need to take to get there.
That's awesome. And all in all, I'm grateful to have you on the show. And I just actually got a major deja vu moment as you were saying that. So I'm sitting here trying to go get rid of that so I can focus on the ending here. But thank you for coming on.
You're welcome. Junaid. Absolutely. This was a ton of fun. When you did the research and sent me that email with 20 questions, I was like, holy smokes, you spent a ton of time on me. So I appreciate that.
I'm happy to do so. And so once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Junaid Ahmed on the Polymath podcast. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks again.